Yo guys, Professor Splashy here, and today, and in the follow-up videos to this, I'm going to be ranking my top 10 favourite and least favourite Pokemon from every generations. These rankings aren't really based on anything other than personal preference, and maybe down to anything from in-game usability, how the Pokemon look, or maybe even just one or two experiences in playthroughs that stuck with me. Also note, some of the reasons given may contradict themselves. I'm aware of that. There's no real set specification on what makes a favourite Pokemon, just like I said, a mixture of stuff. So if I do contradict myself, be aware. I'm aware. That being said, let's start with my top 10 favourite Generation 1 Pokemon. At number 10, we have Hitmonchan. So I'm at an age where I was lucky enough to be around when the first Pokemon games came out. So I remember my first ever playthrough, getting to Saffron City, and being really confused as to why there was two gyms, and why one of them was blocked. So, being naive and 6, I assumed you had to beat the first gym to get to the second one. So we go through, we sweep through all the black belts, and we get to the Karate Master, and again, pretty easy. Fighting types aren't that great in Gen 1. But then we get a choice. And to me, there was no choice. Hitmonlee has always just looked wrong. It just doesn't look like a Pokemon. So we got Hitmonchan. And upon using it for a couple of times, that's when the part that I really loved about Hitmonchan came to light. Fire Punch, Thunder Punch, and Ice Punch were just broken on the Gen 1 Pokemon. Pretty much any issue you had, he could deal with. Grass, Bug or Ice types? No worry, just punch them with a fiery fist of rage. Pull enough, just unleash the thunder. Is Lancer's Dragonite an issue? Nah, don't worry about that, a frosty jab to the nose will sort that right out. Never mind it only had a special stat of 35. I was 6, I was just spamming elemental punches. In at 9, we have Kabutops. Now, I'm sure we've all heard about Lord Helix and just how worshipped it is, but for me, the Dome Fossil was all I was ever choosing for a playthrough. Kabutops, simply, just looks amazing. Who wouldn't want an ancient shellfish Pokemon that can slice its victims in half with its arm scythes? Not enough? How about then sucking its victims dry? Anything with scythe rounds is cool in my book, and to be honest, the only reason it's so far down this is because you can't really ever use one unless you go out of your way for it. But if you want a Pokemon that looks cool, what more do you need? Number 8 is Lapras. Now what's not to like about Lapras? A great moveset with Surf, Ice Beam, Thunderbolt, Psychic and even Body Slam if you so choose. Pretty much means you can solo the entire Elite Four by yourself. Couple that to the Ice and Water type means that you really only have electric types to worry about, and by the point you've got Lapras, you won't have to deal with one of them. So, great stats, good bulk, means even with base 60 speed, you're probably going to survive any one hit, and then retaliate with super effective knockout. And again, the best part about Lapras is, you don't even have to go out your way to get one. Talk to the man before you fight Giovanni and Silph, and there you go. If you need a surf that can do a little bit of everything, there's very few better choices than Lapras. For the number 7 choice, I am cheating slightly by picking Eevee and, in extension, the Evolutions. So why exactly Eevee? Well, Pokemon Yellow was the first game I owned, and it always annoyed me that my rival threw me out of the way when I was about to get my own Eevee, and instead I was lumbered with the useless mouse that couldn't do anything at the start of the game. Then, you try to evolve your stupid mouse, and it refuses. Whilst Eevee not only accepts to evolve, it gives you multiple choices as to what it will become. And what a set of choices you have. Need a quick electric type that looks amazing? Check. Want a strong water type that can take hits and deal with dragons? Also check. How about a fire type that, well, can't actually do a great deal in the first generation because they put all its stats into its base attack and 5 moves special? I mean, but it looks great anyway. I mean, you could just spam Body Slam on it for like Gen 1's Hyper Beam mechanics. And what's even better? The Evolution just kept coming in later generations. Honestly, when the worst thing about a Pokemon is that you could only have one of its evolved forms, you know you've hit a winner. Raichu is number 6, and there's always been something that's annoyed me about how Raichu was treated. As I said in the previous entry, Yellow was the first game I owned, so I was practically unable to get a Raichu without trading, and finding someone with a link cable back then really wasn't easy. So there I was, stuck with a Pikachu against Lieutenant Surge's Raichu that just mega punched and kicked it to death. Raichu was just always hard done to, and when you've actually used one, it was amazing. 2 great attack stats and 110 base speed meant you were hitting hard and fast. Thunderbolt, Double Team, Thunder Wave, and then a choice between Toxic, Hyper Beam or Body Slam meant very few non-ground types would be comfortable. A great design, and more than usable in game. Raichu just didn't deserve the disrespect Game Freak gave it. At 5, we have Cypher, and much like Kabuto, just look at its scythes. Bug Pokemon really struggled to stand out in the first generation because, let's be fair, they were useless. And Cypher wasn't really any different either, which makes this the only Pokemon on the list that is on here purely for what it became in later generations, as well as just looking amazing. Based on a praying mantis, and with a moveset that just kept getting better every generation, Cypher has always been one of those Pokemon I always try and include in any playthrough team. This fact was made even better when I started trying to learn the speedrun for Brilliant Diamond, and Cypher was the go-to Pokemon for that. Possibly the best design in all of Gen 1, Cypher will never not be cool. Number 4 is Gyarados. Now, as the name and profile picture might suggest, I'm a big fan of Magikarp and its roles in the game. It is the epitome of never underestimating any Pokemon despite how weak they appear to begin with. I'm sure we all got scammed by the guy in the Pokemon Center before Mount Moon and had spent 500 hard-earned Pokédolls on what appeared to be a useless fish that could only splash around. Now most people have probably realised it was worthless, thrown it in a box and forgot it ever existed. A select few of us though, we were naive. We believed there was more to come. We spent the countless hours switch training in the hope of better to come. And then level 20 comes, and it happens. Your Magikarp begins to evolve, and what you see before you is a huge, intimidating, dragon-looking beast. Great attack, great moves, a menacing look. What more could you want? Imagine the old man's face when you return with your $500 bargain. The only downside to this Pokemon is they bottled giving it the dragon type it clearly deserved. But without its 4 times weakness to electricity, I'm not sure you'd be able to deal with it. Number 3. Right, so again, let's go back to the beginning of my time playing Pokemon. 6 years old, Pikachu by my side as I approach Pewter City and go to battle Brock. 2 minutes later, and an entire episode of lies behind me, I realised that there was no magical sprinklers that can help electric types defeat Onix, or even Geodude for that matter. So what do? You could train a Caterpie all the way to level 10 and hope Butterfree can get the job done with confusion. Or you could get lucky and run into a male Nidoran. At level 8 you get a 65 base power on attack, but that's not the useful part. That comes at level 12 with double kick. So okay, you've beaten Brock, then what? Well, presumably Nidoran is now your main team member, and if you wait another 15 minutes or so, you complete Mount Moon with your Nidoran having evolved and at least one Moonstone in hand. Now I honestly can't remember how I figured out Nidorino evolved with a Moonstone at first, but as soon as you know, you're presented with a fully evolved Nidoking before the second gym. And what a beast this really is. Vastly overpowered stats for where you are in the game, a move pool that includes classics such as Surf, Body Slam, Ice Beam, Hyper Beam, Thunderbolt and Earthquake. Anything else? Oh yeah, want to make the game as easy as humanly possible? Grab a bag full of X accuracies and teach Horn Drill. There's a reason this is the speedrunning Pokemon of choice, and there's a reason why anytime you play an early generation of Pokemon, you will invariably end up with one of these in your party. At number 2, we have a Pokemon whose in-game type was literally useless to start with, and that Pokemon is Haunter. Now I know the obvious question. Why not Gengar? Well, a few reasons to be honest. Firstly, as said previously, the ability to trade back then relied on a friend with another console, and game, and a link cable, and that just was not the world I lived in. So when my Ghastly evolved into Haunter, that's as far as it went, and honestly, I couldn't have been happier. To me, Haunter has always just looked far more menacing and a better representation of what a ghost type should be. Great special attack and speed is all you ever really need in a normal playthrough, and even with a type that was royally screwed over to begin with, like Lick being your only base damage stab move and psychic types actually being immune to you instead of weak, it still managed to find itself able to completely dominate the game all by itself. Thunderbolt and Psychic will pretty much deal with anything you can think of, and as soon as Gen 4 came around and made some ghost moves that actually use the special stat, you never needed more. And finally, my number one favourite Pokemon is Starmie. Put simply, this is the epitome of everything I wanted in a Pokemon. A fast, hard-hitting solo sweeper that could learn a move to destroy basically every type and team in the game. Another Pokemon with the Surf, Psychic, Ice Beam and Thunderbolt moveset, very few can make better use of it than Starmie. Getting Stab on Surf and Psychic pretty much guarantees you will be able to deal with anything put in front of you, but maybe you don't want to steamroll through teams. Maybe you want to torture them into a slow, painful defeat. Well, how does Recover, Toxic, Double Team and Thunderwave sound? What about setting up Light Screen and Reflect? No matter how you want to go about it, Starmie can probably do it, and do it well. There aren't many Pokemon I will feel comfortable putting in any team, for any game, or even solo running with, but Starmie is definitely capable of doing that, and that's why it's my number one favourite Pokemon from Generation 1.